Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. The so-called Strippers' Bill of Rights was lauded as a major step for entertainers in Washington, but since enactment, the results of the legislation have been mixed. Seattle Times reporter Catalina Gaitán is here to talk about the legislation's successes, failures, and future possibilities. But first, let's get you caught up. If you're looking to do some tide pooling this week, it's the ideal time to roll up your pant legs. NOAA says we're in for some of the lowest tides of the year this week. Beach naturalists from the Seattle Aquarium will be around at area beaches to answer questions between 10 and 1. Peak low tide is predicted at noon today and tomorrow. Laid off federal workers living here in Washington, the state's Employment Security Department is hosting its last of 3 webinars aimed with helping you find a job, get answers about your unemployment options, as well as career and job search assistance. Check it out Thursday from 10 a.m. to noon. And Friday is a big day for women's sports in Seattle. Check out the first ever Salmon Bay FC regular season match this week. Salmon Bay kicks off its inaugural season against the Tacoma Galaxy at Interbay Stadium Friday at 7. If basketball is more your thing, the Storm have a home game that night against the Atlanta Dream. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. Last year, the Washington legislature passed a law dubbed the Strippers' Bill of Rights. It was celebrated as a path to making Washington strip clubs the safest in the country for dancers. The bill went into effect in January, and as Catalina Gaitán reports, things have changed, but strippers say not for the better. Catalina's here now to tell us what the Strippers' Bill of Rights promised, what it actually did, and what's next for entertainers in the state. Thanks for taking the time, Catalina.
Thank you for having me.
Being a stripper is not an easy job, so let's just start with what the demands and the environment of the job are like.
Yes, and I'm going to use the word entertainer and stripper interchangeably. Some folks prefer the word stripper. Others find it that it's a pretty stigmatized term. Entertainer is what's used in the law. From talking to a few of Washington's entertainers, it's a very physically demanding job and can be an emotionally taxing job. You're dancing for hours at a time and dealing with customers who sometimes don't treat you with respect throughout your shift has its own challenges that workers face. So overall, it's not an easy job.
Your reporting talks about how, in particular, Washington clubs are very difficult workplaces for dancers. Let's talk about why that is.
Serving alcohol in strip clubs was banned starting in 1975 in Washington because of a rule passed by the Liquor Control Board called the Lewd Conduct Rule. And this rule blocked any businesses from getting liquor licenses if their employees worked naked or mostly naked. The assumption was that this would make strip clubs safer. But what happened is customers still wanted to drink alcohol. So sometimes customers in Washington would be binge drinking in the parking lot, sneaking in their own alcohol, coming in drunk, and then being aggressive or unruly with the workers. Also, it meant that these clubs lacked the socialization that a bar has or a place that serves alcohol. So customers would come in, oftentimes alone, just seeking one specific service. It meant that the vibes in the clubs were pretty quiet. It wasn't like a party atmosphere or a fun atmosphere. Whereas if you go to a club in, let's say, Portland, where there's many more strip clubs than in Seattle or Washington, because of the liquor sales, there's more people inside the room, and that means there's more eyes watching out for people misbehaving. There's more security, protections from customers who were drinking on their own.
Okay. And that difficult environment, that strangeness in Washington's setup actually means that we have fewer clubs than down in Oregon as well, right?
Yes. Currently, Washington has 11 strip clubs. And by comparison, Portland, and just the city of Portland, has an estimated 50 plus clubs.
All right, so that right there will tell you. Catalina, the Strippers' Bill of Rights was celebrated as a way to make Washington's clubs the safest in the country for dancers. What was it supposed to do?
The Strippers' Bill of Rights offers what advocates were calling like the most comprehensive workplace protections for strippers in the United States. And that included hiring security on site during business hours, installing panic buttons near any place where a dancer was serving a customer, installing keypads in front of locker rooms and dressing rooms, mandating training for employees around things like human trafficking and preventing sexual assault. But from speaking with advocates, what I heard was that, yes, these safety measures are appreciated. They're great if they're actually carried out. But what entertainers really wanted the most was to get a larger share of their revenue so they could actually make a living from their work, essentially.
All right, so dancers want to make a living. That's the bottom line for them. This bill, like we mentioned, was supposed to make Washington's clubs the safest in the country. What's actually happened in the time since it went into effect?
Yeah, so the model that most clubs used was they would charge entertainers a leasing fee per shift. And then they would take a share out of the revenue from services like lap dances and VIP rooms. Let's say the house rent for the day would be $125. Then they would also take $10 from every $40 lap dance. And so a stripper would have to pay the club that $125. But if they went to work and weren't able to sell enough lap dances or enough VIP rooms, they sometimes couldn't afford to pay the club back that $125. And then they would sometimes go into debt with the club that they would have to pay back over time. So it was a constant struggle to pay back these pretty steep leasing fees just to work. But then even if they were able to pay off that leasing fee, it didn't leave them with a lot of take-home earnings. In the Strippers' Bill of Rights, it caps the leasing fees that clubs can charge. And advocates were celebrating this as a huge victory because it seemed like they would finally be able to take home, a decent chunk of their earnings. What has ended up happening is that after the law went fully into effect in January, some clubs in Washington have switched to what they're calling a revenue sharing model. And under this model, they're no longer charging this leasing fee. So entertainers don't have to pay rent to work there or a specific fee each shift to work there. But instead, clubs are charging customers directly, keeping a certain amount as a club fee, and then also taking a portion of an amount they determine from the remaining earnings. And I think the best way to get this point across is to give a specific example. And this example came from a stripper at Deja Vu Showgirls in downtown Seattle. A 1-hour session in a VIP room was $600. Under the previous model, the stripper walked away from that VIP room session with $400. Under this revenue share model, the entertainer walks away with $367.50, which is less than they used to. And workers are saying that builds up over time, each shift. And that stripper is walking away with less money, over $32 for that than they did before this law went into effect.
And you and I are sitting here talking an awful lot about money when this bill was really supposed to be about keeping these kinds of entertainers safer. Are dancers safer? Are conditions better for dancers?
It was hard to get a really comprehensive answer to that question because the club owners that I reached out to were pretty hesitant to speak with me. And it was also hard to get entertainers to talk with me because they're facing retaliation from their employer for talking. But from the entertainers that I did speak with, there are a couple issues. One, they're either making around the same that they used to make before this law went into effect for doing the same work or less. And two, some of the clubs have raised prices, and that has meant that customers are less likely to tip, or they're tipping smaller amounts because they're having to pay more upfront for these services. And from speaking with one stripper, they said that customers would be more grabby, more aggressive, because they're saying, if I'm paying more for the service, I want more from you, the entertainer. And that could be prostitution, pressuring a worker to provide services that either they're not comfortable providing or that are illegal to provide. Even though clubs have hired the security, whether or not that security is actually listening when a stripper says, hey, this customer asked for an illegal service, or this customer grabbed me really aggressively. Sometimes that security or the club staff has this mentality of, well, the customer is always right, and not listening, not really taking the stripper's concerns seriously. So not only have strippers been financially suffering, but the safety measures that they were promised aren't always being carried out. So it feels overall like the environment has gotten worse since this law went into effect.
Would you say that legalizing alcohol in clubs has changed things for the better, for the worse? What has it changed?
From the people that I've spoken to, they've seen a small uptick in customers. They're approaching their busiest season, the summertime, when tourists come in, people are out and about, there's more customers coming into clubs. So they're expecting things to improve, for more alcohol sales to start coming in. But the issue for them is the club gets to keep the profits from those alcohol sales. They don't get a cut of it. But they're saying the clubs are profiting from alcohol. We basically said, we will give you alcohol sales in exchange for letting us to keep more of our earnings. But what has happened is we're still getting the same amount of earnings, but you're also profiting from alcohol.
I want to ask you what the dancers you spoke with told you about what they're experiencing right now and how it's showing up for them.
From the dancers that I spoke to, there is just so much frustration and disappointment because they felt like they had won this incredible victory last year when this law was passed. Their profession is one that is extremely stigmatized and comes with a lot of safety concerns. It's a really difficult and strenuous job, and they felt like they were allowed to be taken advantage of by club owners because it felt like society turned the other way from them because they must deserve it because they chose this profession. So when I spoke to Madison Zakwu, who's at the head of a dancer-led coalition called Strippers Are Workers, which advocated for the Strippers' Bill of Rights, she said, being welcomed into conversations with lawmakers and taken seriously and having this law passed felt like this sea change of how people saw strippers and this profession, and that their work is work and deserving of protections just like any other worker. And there was so much excitement after that victory and so much expectation of how things would be better starting in January, and then to see what they felt like the exact same conditions replicate themselves just using new language with new contracts. It felt like club owners had found a loophole in the law and left them not even in the exact same place where they were before, but worse off.
You had a hard time getting club owners to talk to you for this story, yeah?
Yes.
Why would a club owner switch to a revenue model versus implementing the Strippers' Bill of Rights the way it stands?
One club owner that I talked to from Club Sinrock, which is a strip club in Renton, said that since the Strippers' Bill of Rights went into effect, their cost of business has gone up. So they have to hire a security guard. They have to hire new staff that ensures the club is in compliance with all the various other safety measures that are in the law. They have to pay fines when the they are inspected and they find, you place the keypad code in the wrong place, or there's not enough panic buttons. Each time one of those infractions is found, they have to pay the Department of Labor and Industry. So this club general manager, Tim Lyons, said that it's more expensive to run a club these days. So his club has not shifted to the revenue share model, but he was sympathetic towards other club owners who have. Ultimately, strippers can still collect all of their tips. Clubs don't get any of their tips. And strippers can charge, extra on top of certain services that the clubs don't get a share of. So, clubs set the base prices for something like a lap dance. Let's say it's $50. An individual stripper can say, I'm going to charge $70, and I keep the difference. So he said, strippers find workarounds to make more money. The revenue share model is the club owner's way of doing a workaround so they can make money.
Okay, that's helpful context. Before I let you go, what would it take for the Strippers' Bill of Rights to deliver on its promise of improved conditions for dancers in our state?
The strippers that I talked to said amending the law. They weren't aware that clubs would come up with this revenue share model. They didn't know that it was something they could expect or anticipate. So now that it's happened, the general goal, which was to cap the amount that club owners can take from their earnings and pass an amendment that carries out that goal. We'll see how that shakes out. Madison Zakwu from Strippers Are Workers has been in touch with Senator Rebecca Saldana, one of the sponsors of the Strippers' Bill of Rights, has been in contact with her about these concerns, and they are talking about what options are available to them because all of these fees are legal.
Seattle Times reporter Catalina Gaitán, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Vaughn Jones, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.